And that was former DNI, Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, on this program back in April. And this week, an NBC report that President Biden is asking Defense Secretaries Anthony Blinken and Lloyd Austin to tone down the support of Ukraine as the war enters a fourth month and Russia now controls 20% of Ukraine. According to my next guest, there is new intelligence that suggests the Kremlin could attack the United States and some major cities here. Next, Mike Turner is the ranking Republican of the House Intelligence Committee, sent this letter to President Biden on Friday, citing multiple examples of Russia threatening to use nuclear weapons against the United States and NATO. Congressman Turner joins me right now. Congressman, it's good to see you. Thanks very much for being here. Happy Father's Day to you. Let's talk about this letter.
Happy Father's Day to my 92-year-old dad.
Yes,
Thanks.
That's wonderful. I love to hear that. Okay, so I have your letter in front of us, and I see some of this rhetoric by the Russians and Vladimir Putin. Talk to us about the advanced standoff weapons that made it into the battlefield last week in Ukraine.
Right. Well, the United States has been slow on the uptake of the needs of advanced weaponry that Ukraine has needed. They've been asking for advanced standoff weapons, howitzers. They've made it into the field. The report allow them to have a greater distance to be able to hit Russian tanks and other Russian positions. These will make a big difference on the battle.
So this is the first time that these weapons were used last week at a time that the rhetoric from Vladimir Putin is certainly ramping up. We have some of the comments here. Consequences will be such as you have never seen in your entire history. We can believe that the horsemen of the apocalypse are already on their way and all hope is in Almighty God. Talk to me about what Russia is doing and how the Biden administration is planning to respond. Have you heard back from the president after this letter?
No. So what we're seeing is just increased rhetoric coming from Vladimir Putin, Dmitry Medvedev, of course, his defense ministers referring to, reducing Europe or the United States to nuclear ashes, attacking Miami or Texas. These are very, very concerning statements. The president wrote an op-ed in the New York Times. I'm not certain that Putin reads the New York Times, but that's how the president chose to answer these and said there would be severe consequences. But he's not really made it clear that using nuclear weapons at Ukraine or even certainly, when you look at our NATO allies and our Article 5 obligations and certainly the United States itself, that there would be a quick response, both from the United States and from NATO. Putin knows not to attack the United States and NATO. He knows that our nuclear weapons, UK, France, with a NATO prepositioned weapon, certainly would be devastating to his nation in a response. But what he doesn't know is that it's not going to be okay for him to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. The nuclear options be taken off the table, and this rhetoric from Putin needs to be de-escalated.
Congressman, one comment in this letter really struck me, and I want you to tell us more if you can. And this is from an internationally sanctioned member of the Russian State Duma and a former military commander. And you write this in the letter. He said, they should understand there could be a strike against Miami, Texas, or any other state. Then they'll tuck their tail in. They aren't very brave over there. This is our truth and what we should aspire to and confidently move toward that. So is there a threat on Texas and Miami right now?
Well, I think from this rhetoric, what we're seeing, and certainly what Putin has indicated is his calculus. He does not see in this president a deterrent, or he certainly doesn't see at this time a deterrent threat from the United States, that there would be an unbelievable response, and that his nation certainly would have unbelievable responses from NATO and the United States. He talks about a historic response if he used nuclear weapons, but he is very much aware, and this president needs to make certain that he stands behind our capabilities and that the use of nuclear weapons by Putin is not acceptable in Ukraine, throughout NATO, or obviously a hit on the United States.
So the bottom line, does this president have a plan to respond to Putin?
No, he doesn't, and that's what we're really asking for. We have Article 5 commitments. We certainly have said that we would respond overwhelmingly if the United States was attacked. What we're not hearing is the President of the United States reaffirming this. We're having a NATO meeting. It's coming up in the next couple of weeks. Certainly, could get the reconfirmation from NATO. Article 5 into the use of nuclear weapons. Uh, these deterrent statements would make a huge impact on reining in Russia and certainly the threat to the United States, Ukraine, and NATO.
Let me ask you, I want to ask you about the defense budget. Next week, you are going to be marking up the National Defense Authorization Act. Do you expect that defense spending is going to go higher, as we also have the threat of China? Secretary Lloyd Austin was just with his counterpart in China just last week. And again, we have another dressing down of U.S. officials. First, tell me about the National Defense Authorization Act. What happens in the Congress next week?
So the president sent over a budget that does not adequately fund what we need to do to reinvest in what we have lent to Ukraine, or even what we need to do to replenish our own stores. And then looking back to modernization, what we need to do to make certain that we have the advanced weaponry necessary to defend the United States. His budget was just over $770. The Senate has already marked that up. They added nearly $50 billion more into the budget. I think you'll certainly see that from the House as we take up the National Defense Authorization Act next week. But I think the news in the debate next week is going to be, how do we respond to these new threats of Russia aggression, the support for Ukraine, the threat from China, its aggressiveness. All of those are certainly going to mean that we're going to have to make different choices of how we invest in our military.
And how was that meeting with Lloyd Austin and his counterpart in China? How would you describe it?
I would say it's embarrassing. I mean, this is the second time a member of Biden's cabinet has sat across from Chinese officials that have completely downdressed them. And then they've done so on the world stage. This certainly is a time where not only are we concerned about Chinese aggression, but people are very much aware of the human rights abuses, of what they're doing with the surveillance society and their own population, what they're trying to do with developing nations in exporting their authoritarian regime. This is not a time where the United States should passively accept being chastised by China.
Yeah, and I guess the defense minister of China said that anybody who gets in the way of the CCP going after Taiwan is on a path to death, was the quote.
Right, and that's just parallel the type of rhetoric that we hear from Russia. These are the types of statements that you would hear previously from the rogue regimes like North Korea and Iran, not stable nuclear powers such as Russia and China. This clearly is a very dangerous time, and this president needs to step up to the plate. He needs to start making clear that this type of behavior is not acceptable, that there will be responses from the United States, that we are strong and committed to our defense and our allies, and that deterring aggression can make the world safer.
All right, Congressman, it's great to get your take this morning. Thank you so much for